We're about to dive into one of history's absolute darkest chapters. It's a story of how an entire nation, driven by just sheer desperation, was led down a path that ended in unimaginable horror. Just imagine hearing those words. And no, this isn't from some movie script. This was a real conversation a father had with his wife, a conversation their young son happened to overhear. So that boy's name was Helmuth. It's the spring of 1945, and he's lying there in his bed as World War II is finally, grindingly coming to a halt. His father, a Nazi supporter, was completely consumed by fear, a fear so profound it led him to consider the absolute unthinkable. The very next day, after one last walk in the woods, Helmuth's father went to his office and shot himself. So you have to ask, right? What could possibly drive a man to that point? Well, to really understand his terror, and the terror that gripped an entire nation, we actually need to rewind the clock. We have to go all the way back to the end of the First World War. Because here's the thing, the story of Hitler's rise doesn't begin with strength. It begins with weakness, the profound weakness of a nation that had been brought completely to its knees. So, after 4 brutal years of war, Imperial Germany was defeated. The emperor fled, and out of all that chaos, a new democratic government was formed, the Weimar Republic. But its very first act was to sign a peace treaty that most Germans saw as a total national humiliation. And the terms of that treaty, they were just crushing. Germany lost huge chunks of its industrial heartland, its entire colonial empire, and on top of all that, it was forced to accept sole blame for the war. The financial burden was just staggering, literally designed to keep Germany weak for an entire generation. And this right here is the crucial point. Many Germans didn't blame the old empire for losing the war. Nope, they blamed the new democratic republic for accepting what they saw as a shameful, disgraceful peace. They were branded the November criminals, traitors who had supposedly stabbed Germany in the back. So this new democracy was born with this huge cloud of deep resentment hanging over it from day one. And all this political instability was about to get supercharged by 2 of the worst economic disasters in modern history. You see, unable to pay its reparations in gold, the German government just fired up the printing presses. They simply printed more and more money, thinking it would solve the problem. It didn't. It created an absolute economic nightmare. The speed of this collapse was just breathtaking. I mean, look at these numbers. In April, $1 was worth 24,000 German marks. By December of that same year, it was worth nearly 99 million. The currency had become completely and totally worthless. The images from this time are just surreal. You've got people pushing wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy groceries. A lifetime of savings could no longer buy a single cup of coffee. The entire economic foundation of their society was just crumbling. And just as Germany was maybe kinda starting to stabilize thanks to some American loans, the 1929 Wall Street crash hit. Those loans dried up instantly, and Germany was plunged right back into darkness, this time taking the rest of the world with it. By 1932, we're talking about a staggering 6 million people out of work in Germany. On street corners, you would see men with signs around their necks that simply read, "We'll do any work." Desperation was absolutely everywhere. And in this vacuum of despair, well, that's when opportunity knocks for the darkest of forces. To a people terrified of unemployment, the Nazis promised jobs. To a nation feeling humiliated, they promised pride and strength. To a country in chaos, they promised a single, powerful leader. They offered simple, seductive answers to incredibly complex problems. So how did one man and his small fringe party capitalize on this perfect storm of misery to seize absolute control? Well, the connection is undeniable. In 1928, before the Great Depression, the Nazis were a political joke, winning just 2.6% of the vote. 4 years later, in the depths of the crisis, they had become the single largest party in Germany. The rise was meteoric, and it was fueled entirely by the economic collapse. Hitler himself was a master of propaganda and a mesmerizing public speaker. He held these massive rallies, promising to tear up the Treaty of Versailles, rebuild the military, and restore Germany's honor. And, crucially, he gave the people scapegoats, blaming Jews, communists, and those November criminals for all of Germany's suffering. And once in power, this ideology of hate and scapegoating was just unleashed. It led to a systematic, state-sponsored genocide, a war not just against other nations, but against innocent civilians living right within Germany's own borders. The numbers are almost impossible to truly comprehend. 6 million Jews murdered, millions of others, Poles, Roma, the disabled, political opponents, all systematically exterminated in killing centers like Auschwitz. This was the ultimate, horrific consequence of the Nazis' rise to power. Which brings us right back to where we started, with Helmuth's father. His terror in 1945 wasn't just the fear of a defeated soldier. It was the guilty fear of a man who knew exactly what his side had done. He had supported a regime that committed genocide, and he believed the victors would now inflict that same horror upon him and his family. And that leaves us with a final, chilling question. The story of Nazism's rise is a powerful warning. It shows us how economic collapse, national humiliation, and the appeal of a strongman with easy answers can cause an entire society to lose its moral compass, with consequences that still echo today.